The morning air carried the usual calm of the suburban neighborhood, the kind of stillness that masked tensions just beneath the surface. Rows of manicured lawns and uniform homes stretched for blocks, every hedge trimmed to perfection, every driveway spotless. But behind this facade of order, there were rules enforced not just by law but by the unspoken power of the Homeowners Association. Among them was Regina Whitmore, the HOA president, known for her meticulous control over the community. Every mailbox, every exterior paint color, every lawn ornament had been scrutinized and regulated under her watchful eyes. To outsiders, she was a champion of order. To those who had crossed her, she was a tyrant. Miles Thompson had once thought this neighborhood a haven of peace, a place where he could finally settle down. He had worked tirelessly for years to acquire 1,500 acres of land on the outskirts, dreaming of building a legacy, not just for himself, but for his family. He was methodical, precise, and careful with every transaction, every legal document. Yet, when he discovered that the HOA had sold portions of his land, illegally, without his consent or knowledge, he felt a storm rising within him. It was a bold, unprecedented move. The documents showed their hand. Forged signatures, falsified approvals, and unauthorized sales to developers who wanted nothing more than to carve his property into profit. Anger bubbled silently at first, simmering beneath Miles' calm demeanor. He remembered the meetings, the polite requests for clarification, the polite letters sent to the HOA office that went unanswered or were met with evasive responses. Every effort to reclaim his property legally had been stonewalled, yet the law was clear. The title was his. Every inch of land belonged to him, and the law did not favor those who tried to cheat through bureaucracy and intimidation. The first step was documentation. Miles spent days in county records offices, poring over deeds, sale agreements, and HOA meeting minutes. Each page was another confirmation of injustice. Each notarized signature that had been altered, each recorded vote that had never occurred, became ammunition for the legal battle he was about to wage. But his approach was not reactive. It was strategic. He understood power, and he understood leverage. If the HOA had taken his land illegally, they had made themselves vulnerable, not just morally, but financially and legally. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows over the pristine lawns that masked corruption, Miles began to plot his next move. He would not merely reclaim what was his. He would turn the tables in a way that no one in the HOA could anticipate. The neighborhood that had once seemed so controlled and predictable would now experience chaos in a manner dictated entirely by the law. He would fight fire with fire, but in a way that the HOA could not touch, using contracts, property rights, and the courts as his arsenal. Neighbors started noticing subtle changes. The quiet man who kept to himself was now frequently seen at the county offices, conversing with clerks and lawyers, carrying stacks of documents. Whispers spread to the community. Miles Thompson was not ordinary. Rumors of illegal land sales were circulating, and those who had once nodded politely at HOA meetings began to glance nervously at their meticulously painted homes. What had been a symbol of stability was now a source of tension, as if the ground itself sensed a battle brewing. The first legal filings were submitted quietly but decisively. Letters of demand were sent, citing violations, falsifications, and the unlawful transfer of property. The HOA attempted to dismiss them, claiming oversight and miscommunication, but Miles' evidence was airtight. Every forged signature, every fraudulent vote, every misrepresented approval was documented and verified. The intimidation tactics that the HOA usually relied upon, the friendly warnings, the fines, the veiled threats of litigation, were now impotent against Miles' meticulous preparation. Night fell, and the neighborhood returned to its superficial calm. Streetlights flickered over perfectly aligned sidewalks, and the wind whispered through the trees, as if carrying the tension Miles had cultivated throughout the day. Inside his study, he spread the maps and deeds across the desk, tracing the lines of what had been his land and what had been stolen. He marked every encroachment, every subdivision, every sale. It was a blueprint not only of what had been taken, but of how justice could be exacted. The balance had shifted. What the HOA believed was a simple, unquestioned hierarchy was now vulnerable, exposed by the precision of one determined man. As the first chapter of this battle closed, Miles looked out over the horizon, his gaze steady and unwavering. He knew the coming months would test patience, resolve, and strategy. But he also knew that the law was on his side, and that there was a profound satisfaction in turning injustice into leverage. The calm of the neighborhood was deceptive. Change was imminent. And when it came, it would not be subtle. The story was only beginning. Morning came with a deceptive tranquility, the kind that made the neighborhood seem untouched by the storms brewing beneath its polished surface. Miles Thompson's quiet diligence had already begun to unsettle the HOA, though they had yet to fully grasp the scope of what they were facing. Regina Whitmore and her board members gathered in the HOA office, sipping coffee and attempting to maintain their usual air of authority. The letters from Miles sat unopened on a side table, a silent testament to the threat they were too arrogant to acknowledge. Miles' strategy was surgical. He did not rely on threats or confrontations. He let the law speak with clarity and precision. Each filing he submitted highlighted specific violations: unauthorized sales, fraudulent signatures, and misrepresentation of his property in official records. The filings demanded immediate rectification, including the return of the land, financial restitution for lost revenue, and coverage of legal costs. The HOA could attempt to ignore it, but the paperwork was binding, verifiable, and uncompromising. By midweek, whispers of Miles' actions had begun to ripple through the neighborhood. Homeowners who had once blindly followed Regina's edicts now questioned the stability of the system they depended on. Rumors traveled quickly. Miles Thompson, the quiet man with the sprawling acreage, was taking on the HOA, and he had the law firmly in his corner. Some residents wondered if the confrontation could spill into their own properties, and a subtle unease settled over the pristine streets. The HOA scrambled to respond. Regina issued a vague statement claiming administrative error and promised an internal review. But Miles had anticipated this. His filings were precise, time-stamped, and cross-referenced with county records, making any internal review a futile attempt at delay. Every excuse, every attempt at diversion, only reinforced the inevitability of the legal process. The board's usual tactics, threats of fines, letters of compliance, friendly persuasion, had no impact against the weight of meticulously documented proof. Meanwhile, Miles began leveraging another weapon: property law itself. He had studied the covenants, easements, and bylaws that govern the neighborhood, uncovering clauses that the HOA relied upon to assert control over homeowners. With the legal backing of his land deeds, he realized he could reverse the dynamics. If the HOA had illegally sold his land, then by law, any assets they held under questionable circumstances could be challenged. Miles began mapping out a plan to target not just his stolen property, but the HOA's financial vulnerabilities. Tension started manifesting in subtle ways. Delivery drivers noticed homeowners answering doors with more caution. HOA board meetings, once dominated by Regina's confident pronouncements, grew quieter, strained. Members whispered among themselves, checking the envelopes in their hands, questioning every decision, every precedent. The illusion of absolute control was fading, replaced by a fragile anxiety that Miles had expertly cultivated through legal means. Behind the scenes, Miles prepared his next move. He consulted with attorneys, pored over land surveys, and strategized the exact order in which to proceed. The goal was not chaos for its own sake. It was precision. Each step was designed to create leverage, to make the HOA confront the consequences of their illegal actions. If the law could restore his land, it could also open avenues to reclaim damages, ensuring that justice would not only be served but felt. By the weekend, the first court dates were scheduled. Notices were served to the HOA, their offices now facing scrutiny under the weight of public records and legal filings. Social media buzzed with gossip, threads speculating about the quiet man taking on a powerful association. Videos of the neighborhood's pristine lawns and uniform homes contrasted sharply with the invisible tension simmering beneath, a tension that Miles had expertly exposed. Residents started making subtle choices, whether consciously or unconsciously. Some began documenting every interaction with the HOA, taking photographs of their homes and saving correspondence. Others whispered about selling their properties before the legal battles escalated further, unsure if siding with the HOA would be a risk. Miles' actions had become a catalyst, exposing not only corruption but also fear. The kind that thrives when power is challenged and control is questioned. As the week closed, Miles remained methodical. The courtroom would soon become the stage where his meticulous preparation would meet the HOA's overconfidence. He knew the coming battles would not be won overnight, but every legal motion, every file document, and every public disclosure was a calculated step toward ultimate leverage. The calm of the neighborhood was a thin veneer. Beneath it, tension had grown into a quiet storm. Miles was ready. And the HOA, for the first time in its carefully controlled existence, was on the defensive. The courtroom battles ended, and the HOA's arrogance crumbled under Miles' precision. His land was restored, and in a legal twist, he reclaimed portions of their properties as restitution. Neighbors watched as the once untouchable HOA faltered, its control shattered. Miles' patience and strategy had turned injustice into triumph. Order returned to the neighborhood, but now with a new lesson. Power without integrity is fragile, and one determined man could rewrite the rules. Justice had spoken,